So I had a request to step through continuing case 5-1, and this is actually a good exercise because the test is going to cover stuff like this. So here's one more practice point for you. So the biggest starting point with 5.1 is understanding what the data looks like. So if you remember from your accounting information systems class, this is like a form of an entity relationship diagram. It's a database schema. You see the column names listed here. The primary keys are in yellow. And then our SOL table, we have all these column names, and those look like product IDs. So if we take a look at our SOL table, notice how across the top we have a sales order number, but then we have a bunch of product IDs. Well, we need to understand what these numbers are. And from the data dictionary, if we come back here and take a look at our data dictionary, if we look at any one of these product ID columns, it says quantity ordered for product 100, quantity ordered for product 150. So that's basically our sales order quantity. And if you remember the LeGrind data from before, that would make sense. So these numbers over here on our SOL table, that means that 2 units of product 100 were on order number 1. 1 unit of product 150 was on order number 1. 1 unit of product 200 was on order number 1, so on and so forth. If we come down here, 3 units of product 100 were on order 14. So the other thing that should catch our attention is if we're going to combine all these data tables together, we're going to need something to combine SOL to inventory. As you can see here, we can take customer ID and combine it with customer and sales order. That's how we're going to join the tables. We're going to take sales order number and sales order number to join sales orders and SOL, but we don't have a common column here. We have a product ID over here, but we don't have a product ID column here. In fact, those product IDs are our column headers. And so what we need to do is we need to take these product IDs and we need to pivot them down so they're in their own column. And so that's one of the first steps we're going to take when we get ready to join the data. So let's read the instructions here. I give you a hint, you'll need to create a new table called sales order lines. Think line items. That's what our sales detail flat file was. And then which of the 4 existing tables has the information that a line item contains? Well, our SOL table, once we transpose it and unpivot it, it will. And then once we unpivot it, we want to be able to get it like this. So it'll look like this. You can see now we've, instead of sales order line ID, which we can just forget that. That doesn't even show up in here. I'm not sure why they put that in there. So let's ignore that. That's why I crossed it out. Notice we're going to have product ID, which we could join with product ID. And sales order number we can join with sales order number. And so this is where we want to get. We want our data tables to be structured in this form, and we're about to do that. So we read the data dictionary. I'm not going to spend time on that. The biggest thing here is knowing that each of those product ID columns contains a quantity ordered. And here we go. So LeGrind wants us to identify and correct data issues with this data set. And in addition, they want us to join the 4 tables in such a manner as to not lose any data or information. You'll want to use Power Query for the joins, which we'll do, and we'll place the final join data on a worksheet called All Data. But before we join any data, we want to make sure that our existing data tables are clean and prepared. And I give you this hint here, clean data issues on the original 4 tables, and apply these data preparation patterns from the textbook. So this is how I'd apply them. 10 is invalid values. So I would go to the textbook, I'd read it. Invalid values are values that are just outside the range of what we're expecting. And so I'd go visit every column. Is there anything in customer ID that indicates that maybe there's invalid values? I jump clear down. I see it increments. It looks good to me. Customer name. It's really hard to say that there's an invalid customer name. They kind of choose that. Address. We could actually stick this through like a U.S. Postal Service and validate each address. But for the time being, these all look good. Like Austin, here's one thing we could check. We could actually turn on a filter here. And you have to be a little careful here because this doesn't catch spaces, which we'll see in just a minute. And we'll just go through and see. It doesn't look like there's like permutations of the same city or abbreviations. And so that's one way that I check for valid values. Same here with Texas and our states. They all look to be spelled out. There's not a mix of, and that would be inconsistent values, by the way. And so invalid values, we'd say, is there a city called Columbus? Yes. Chattanooga? Yes. That's our pattern. So the rest of these all look good. We have no reason to believe that sales tax rates are invalid. We're going to accept those. So we go to the next table. We'll zoom in and scroll to the top. We'll expand these so we can see them all. And again, no issues with sales order number, sales order date, planned ship date, customer ID. And I take that back. Let's actually take a look at sales order date. So customer ID, we're going to assume that we automatically assign those, so I wouldn't suspect that we have invalid values. Let's do this. Let's see if we can't check for outliers here. If I just take this and turn the filter on and I sort newest to oldest, you can see here that I've got stuff that's in 2052. Well, this data set ended in 2025, so we know that these values must be invalid. So then we have to kind of put our critical thinking hat on and ask ourselves, how could we have gotten 2052? Well, we've all done it. You fat finger something and you type 52 instead of 25. To me, that is the most logical hypothesis, the best explanation for what happened here. So we're just going to correct those. So we come back here and we say the rest of our data is all between 2023 to 2025. And you can see here that we can actually identify there's wrong years in here. So we can go fix those. Same 42, so we fix those to 24. We fix those to 23. Now, I don't know of any quick way, other than finding and replacing, if we had a lot of these, to actually fix all these dates if they were entered wrong. You might just have to go find them and fix them. Now, let's go do the same thing with planned ship date. You can see same thing here. So we'll say change that to 25, that to 24, that to 23. Then we'll sort one more time, oldest to newest. Oldest to newest, make sure we don't have any on the lower end. Looks like we fixed those. So we have just applied the invalid values. There's a date in the future that's definitely invalid. Pattern to fix these. So let's go take a look, see if we can find other places for that. Like we could look at all these and see if there's any outliers for its quantity ordered. But I'll just tell you right now there aren't any. And inventory, let's check for invalid values. Like organic Hawaiian, that's a valid. Here we have medium, light. You can see we have light and MD, that probably stands for medium, but that's a different pattern, which we're going to come back to. So we're good the rest of the way here with invalid values. So now let's go to inconsistent values. So we go back to inventory and we say, oh, look here, there's light, light. In fact, I'm going to sort these so it's easier to pick them up, right? So there's espresso, there's light, light. Oh, that's probably going to be light. And so one thing you can do is if you highlight the whole range in Windows in Excel on Windows, you hit Control H And you can do find and replace. So we do, let's replace LT with LIGHT. Replace all. We made one replacement. Let's replace MD period with medium. Replace all. And now there's one other tricky thing in here that will bite you in the butt a number of times before you always think to look for it. And let's just take a look here. If I go apply a filter, you can take a look and see I've got 4 different values for roast type. Well, there's a couple ways that we can dig a little deeper, and it could be deceiving. I could go create a pivot table. So let's just create a pivot table, let it create a new range. Then I'm going to drag roast type to rows. We'll zoom in here, and you can see that it duplicates light and medium. And so right away that tells me, well, there's something different about those 2 versions of light and 2 versions of medium. And if we actually can't double click in here, so it's hard to see it. So I'm going to delete this tab. We're going to go back. There's another way. There's this function in Excel that just in recent editions of Excel, it's called unique. And unique, I can go give it a range, and it's going to return a range giving me all the unique values. And again, it's hard to double click in here and interrogate them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy them and then paste just the values. And now when I go in and I hit F2, let's take a look at light. I hit F2 to modify the cell. You can see my blinking cursor right there. It's right up against the T. I come down to this light, hit F2, and you can see there's a space in there. Same thing down here with medium. Hit F2, there's a space. So I'll get rid of these. I use it as a sandbox. I'm just deleting them. So what I can do is I can go find and replace again, Control H, and I'm going to take medium space and replace it with medium no space. And it actually says there was one replacement. I'm going to do the same thing with light. Light, oops, I got to get the space in there. Light space, replace all, and it replaced it twice. So now, if I actually do the unique formula again, you can see that I end up with 4 unique values, and that's exactly what I want because I'm an owner of the business, or I know the business, and therefore I know that we only have 4 different roast types. So I fix those roast types there. Let's see, is there any other place we'd have inconsistent values? I mean, these are places that I'd check, like, is Austin spelled differently? Is Texas spelled differently? And again, the way you would find it is to remove the duplicates. And if there's a space, that wouldn't be counted as a duplicate. So we're good there. So we've applied inconsistent values, invalid values, and then we have a pattern, incorrect or ambiguous table name. That would be down here. What does SOL stand for? Well, if you're a sailor, it means something different than if you're a LeGrind employee. SOL probably stands for sales order lines. So we're going to rename that. But this 16 we're going to apply first. Data model does not comply with dimensional modeling principles. That actually comes back to our schema up here. This is not good data modeling, and so we're going to change that. So we're going to go use Power Query to do this. I'm going to load this into Power Query. I'll click inside the data and go get data from table or range. Let it come in. There we go, and you can see we have a bunch of nulls. And what do those nulls mean? That just means that on sales order 4, product 100 was not sold. And so what I want to do is I want to unpivot these columns. So I click in the first product 100 column, hold down shift, and hit right arrow. And I highlight all my product ID columns. I go to transform and unpivot columns. Now I'm going to show you a different way to do this. We could actually do the inverse of that. So notice we've got attributes, and that's my product IDs. We got values. I'm going to undo it real quick and show you one other way. So if I just click on the column that I don't want to unpivot, I can come down here to unpivot and pull down and select unpivot other columns. And that's going to do the same thing. So a little shortcut. And then I know this is my product ID. And then these would be my sales order quantity. I'm just going to put quantity in there. All right, I'll zoom in here a little so you can see it. So all we did was unpivot those. Now we have a product ID that we can join on with inventory. I'm going to call this, based on the instructions, you have to call this sales order lines. And now we'd like to actually go and get the other tables because our next step is to join it. But I'm going to pop out of here and get back into Excel. You see it imported my sales order lines. Now let's just go verify. I told us to name it sales order lines. And because I named it before I imported it, loaded it into Excel, this got named down here. The sheet got named to sales order lines. And the table, if I go to table design, you can see up here that got named to sales order lines. And you want to especially make sure that the table is named sales order lines because with XPrep I use the table name to actually check some values. So now when we're all done applying those data preparation patterns, let's go back down here. We just did this. We transformed the SOL table. That's basically applying 16. We use Power Query to do that. And then when we renamed it sales order lines, we applied the number 11 data preparation pattern and corrected it to be a non-ambiguous name. Now we want to join all four tables, and we're going to put them in a table in a worksheet called all data. And we want to join data so that we don't lose any information. And just like we've talked about repeatedly in class, that means we're going to start with our line items because it has the lowest level of information. And if you don't understand that, you need to go study that and understand that. So we're going to we've already got sales order lines in Power Query. And instead of going out and loading this file, I'm just going to load these individually. So I'll take this. I'm going to go data from table or range. This is kind of clunky. There's another way you could do it. See, so now that's table 3. I'm going to call this customers. You can go to new source and file, and we could go load in Excel and get all of them there. But there's no from table or range in here. So I'm just going to I got it loaded into Power Query. And notice it's going to duplicate it because there's a version in Excel, a version in Power Query. Now I need sales orders. I'm going to go get that from table or range. This is my sales orders. And then I'm going to go get one more. I need my inventory table. Again, notice that it's duplicating it. That's why, because there's one version in Excel, one version got imported from Power Query. So it's almost like we loaded it into Power Query and then we loaded it back into Excel. All right, so last one, let's get this from table or range. Now we've got all four in there and we're just going to do our joins, and this is one that you've seen done many times before. So we're going to start with sales order lines. We're going to go we're going to go home. Merge queries as new so I don't blap over my existing table. And let's just merge in inventory first. on product ID. Oh, and then you run into a problem here that is really common. You see you get this error, and it's basically, it says select columns of the same type. In other words, the same data type. If you look real close here, product ID, the numbers here are right justified. The numbers up in sales order lines are left justified. So that's an indicator that they're different data types. So let's cancel out of here and fix that. If you look, let's zoom in a little. If you look right here and look at that icon, that's a different data type than if we go to inventory and we look at the icon. That's a 1, 2, 3, so that's a numeric data type. So let's actually go back to sales order and we'll change it to be numeric, so a whole number. Now I change that. Now let's go try to merge queries again. Merge queries as new. Inventory, select product ID, and now it's happy. I'm doing a left outer. We'll call this all data. Then I need to expand this. I don't want it to tack on the table name, which would be inventory on the front of each column names, and I don't need product ID because product ID is right there. So this is stuff we've repeated. So I'm just going to quickly do the rest of these joins. Okay, so then I'm going to go join in sales orders on sales order number. Expand this, don't need sales order number. And then I'm going to go join in, last but not least, customers on customer ID. And expand those columns. Don't need a duplicate customer ID. And so there I have it. I've got all my data together. I cleaned it all before I joined it, so everything in my table should be clean. If you didn't do that, then you might have to go back and do some cleaning in your all data table. So once that loads in, then we're basically done with continuing case 5.1. So again, you'd want to make sure that this is on an all data sheet. And if I go to the table design, table name, it says all data because I'm going to be checking that there's an all data table and be looking inside that all data. So I hope that was helpful.